Daf Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph will begin Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Gufo Amarav Ein Movi Niter Belechi V'Kaira. A Movi you're not allowed to carry in a Movi. It's not Niter. A Movi with a Lechi V'Kaira with this minimal kind of separation. It's just a vertical post of any width or a Kaira, horizontal beam. We only allow this kula unless it has at least 2 chatzeres, and each chatzer has at least 2 batim open into it. There we allow this kula that even though the movi is open at one end into the Rishus Harabim, nevertheless we allow a separation, a minimal kind of a separation, with a lechi or kaira, as opposed to a chatzer. A chatzer which is open at one end to the Rishus Harabim, we don't allow carrying it with just a lechi or kaira. Over there we need a pas dalet. But over here by a movi we're mekel. We're only mekel is a movi to give this kula if it has batim v'chatzeres psuchim l'saychai. The Mishabur brings down the Chuvas of Rashba that explains it as follows. What's the say? Why are we mekel with a movi and machmer with a chatzer? He says as follows, that a chatzer is a private place. It's a private place if it's open to the Rishus Harabim. In order to maintain its characteristic and its nature as a private place, it needs more of a separation. It needs a pas dalet. Otherwise, it's considered to be breached and opened into the Rishus Harabim, and you can't carry. A movi, by its nature, is less a private place. It's a place where they have people. It's a street. People walk. People from other houses and areas walk through this side street. So therefore, to maintain its characteristics, you don't need that much of an enclosure. You need just a minimal type of enclosure, a lechi or a kaira. As long as you have a lechi or kaira, then it maintains its characteristics and it's separated from the Rishus Harabim. But a chatzer, which is a more private area, to maintain its characteristic, has to have a pas dalet. Otherwise, it's considered to be breached into the Rishus Harabim. You can't carry. So Rav says, what's the minimum amount that you need in order to have a movi to say that it's considered to be somewhat of a public area, it's a common area, it has the batim chatzeres psuchim l'saycha. Otherwise, we would treat it as a chatzer, as a private area. But a Shmuel says that's not necessary. He says, even if it has one house that doesn't have a chatzer, and one chatzer with at least one house, that's enough to treat it as a movi, to treat it as this semi-public area. Rav Yochanan Amar, he says even less. I feel a churba. Even if on one side of the movi there is a churba, a ruin, and the other side it has a chatzer with one house open to it, that's enough. So if you have the movi in the middle, and on one side you have a ruin house, another chatzer with one house, that's enough to consider to be a movi which is niter belechi v'kaira. Amar le'Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yochanan, afilu b'shul shel kromim. Did he say the Rav Yochanan that if on the other side you don't have a chor, but you only have a path, you have a path that leads through a vineyard, is that enough to be considered to be a movi? So Rav Yochanan says even a chor, but even if on one side you have a chatzer with a house, at least one house, the other side you have a ruin, it's enough that between them the side street between them is a movi. It's niter belechi. Let's say on the other side you don't have a chor, but you only have a shvil shel kromim. You have a path that passes through a vineyard. Is that enough? He said no. Shvil shel kromim is not sufficient. It doesn't qualify. He said only a churba. What's the difference? In both cases, you don't have residents there. In either event, there is no one living in the churba. It's a ruin. And the shil kromim, you don't have residents. He says no. Nevertheless, there is a chilik because the chazil because the churba is suitable. It's fit for dira. It has partial walls. It has a roof. People could live there temporarily, shasat chak. So it has somewhat royal adira, and therefore it makes the Movi into more of a public place. But a shilshel kromim, it's just a pathway. People don't and can't live over there. Aval shilshel kromim l'chazal adira loy, then that doesn't qualify. So we have this basic machlokes whether a churba would be sufficient. Amrav huna bar chinana v'az Rav Yechon l'tamei. Rav Yechon said that it's sufficient. It follows his reasoning that we see from the following. This non we learned in the Mishnah that Rav Shimon says echad gagais v'echad karpipais v'echad chatzerais, whether you have rooftops or karpipais or chatzerais, there are reshus achas and l'kelim sheshafsel l'soichon v'loi l'kelim sheshafsel b'soich bayis. He says that you can transfer from all of these areas. Midrabanan, the Rabbanan asered carrying from a house to a chotzer, unless there's an Erev. Why is that? Because a house is a private area. A chotzer is an area in common with other owners. It has the appearance of transferring from a shusayach to a shusarabim. It has that appearance. So the Chum mastered it because you might think you can carry from a shusayach to shusarabim. So therefore, you can't carry from a house to a chotzer. A house is one ownership. A chotzer is ownership in common. The Chachamim hold, similarly, you can't transfer from a rooftop to another rooftop, to a different ownership rooftop. Or one owner owns ownership group has a chotzer, you cannot transfer it to a different ownership group. Ownership group that has a different chotzer. Same thing with the karpifes. Rav Shimon says they're all one rishus. So therefore, you can transfer from one chotzer to a different chotzer. You can even transfer from a chotzer to a gag, from a gag to a gag, from a gag to a karpif. They're all one rishus. The fact that none of these areas are completely private areas, therefore it does not have the appearance of transferring from a rishus yach to rishus rabim, and all of these areas are mutter. They're all mutter to transfer in all these areas. The Isser D'Rabbanan was not included in this. It was in a case where you have a house, which is private, to some area that's in common, a common ownership, or a semi-private area, or a semi-public area, but not from all of these areas which have the same characteristics and do not have the appearance of transferring Rishus Yach to Rishus Harab. So, but Rav Shimon qualifies it. He says they're all mutter. The Rishus Achas l'kelim b'shafs l'soichan, only for kelim that on the onset of Shabbos were in these areas, were either in a chotzer, were in a karpif, or a gag. But if there were kelim that were in a house on the onset of Shabbos, then they came into a chotzer, then they cannot be transferred from that chotzer to a different chotzer, from a chotzer to a rooftop. If there was a kelim utensils that on the onset of Shabbos were in a chotzer, a karpov, or a gag, they can be transferred one area to the other. But if on the onset of Shabbos they were in a house, and then during Shabbos they came into one of these areas, they cannot be transferred further to the other areas. And Rav says, Allah is like Rav Shimon, but v'hu shloi eru. But that's only if the members of the chotzer did not join in an eruv. Because if the members of the chotzer joined in an eruv, were concerned that you might have a keli that started off Shabbos in the house, since there's an eruv, it got transferred to the chotzer, and there you might now transfer it from one chotzer to a different chotzer. So therefore, in that case, we do not allow transferring kelim from chotzer to chotzer, even kelim that were in the chotzer on the onset of Shabbos. Because since if there's an eruv, it's common, it's likely that you would have kelim that started off Shabbos in a house and got transferred to a chotzer because there's an eruv, and there you might take one of those kelim and transfer it to a different gag or a different chotzer, etc., and which is awesome. Therefore, that what we say halachas l'Rav Shimon, and you can transfer from a chotzer to chotzer, chotzer to gag, etc. It's only if there's no erev. There's no erev. So therefore, we're not concerned that there might be a kelim that started off in Shabbos in the house and found its way to a chotzer. But if there's an erev, we don't permit carrying kelim, even kelim that started off Shabbos in the chotzer, because since there's an erev, you might carry kelim that started off Shabbos in the house. Aval irvu gazrina dilma asalafuki mana devatim lechotzer. But if there's an erev, we're geyser because you might carry the kelim that started off in the house, and you might carry kelim from from the house to a different chotzer. Shmuel Omar ben Ervu uvein loy Ervu. Shmuel says we're not geyser. It makes no difference whether there's an erev or not. You cannot carry kelim that started off Shabbos in the house, but you could carry kelim that started off Shabbos in the chotzer, and we're not geyser that you'll carry kelim from the house to that started off Shabbos in the house to a different chotzer. The looks like Shimon, whether there is an erev or not. So what do we see? Alma loy garzrinan. That you see that we're not geyser transferring kelim between chatzeiros dilmas lafugim on the bottom of chotzer, on account that perhaps you'll carry kelim from the house to a different chotzer. You see that even though there's a chashash of carrying kelim, it's also to carry kelim from a house to a different chotzer, but we're not geyser carrying kelim from chotzer to chotzer because you might come to carry kelim from the house to a different chotzer. Hachanami loy gazrina dilma asala puki mana de chotzer lechurban. So here also, if we allow you to carry in the mavli, and it's nitzer b'lechi v'kaira, if on one side there's a churba, on one side there is a ruin, on the other side there is a chotzer with a house. If there's no sheet of mevuos, you're not allowed to carry from the house to the mavoi, from the mavoi to the churba. You're allowed to carry from the chotzer into the mavoi, because if on the other side there's only a churba, there's no other diurim to aser. So you're allowed to carry from the chotzer to the mavoi, even if there's no sheet of mevuos, because if the other side there's only a churba, there's no other resident to aser. But you would not be able to carry from the mavoi to the churba. You would not be allowed to carry kelim from a chotzer to the mavoi and from there to the churba. Now perhaps you'll say that we should ask you carrying from the chotzer to the mavoi and carrying in the mavoi and carrying through the mavoi, because you might come to carry that kelim to the churba. But we're not geyser. Rav Yochanan says we're not geyser, and the mavoi is nitzer b'lechi v'kaira, even though you cannot carry from the mavoi into the churba. It's also Rav Yochanan l'tamei, as we see over here, that he passes like Rav Shimon, afilu irvu, that even though you're not allowed to carry the kelim from the house to a different chotzer, nevertheless, he does allow you to carry kelim from that were shalsu b'chotzer, from the chotzer to the chotzer. And we're not geyser if you carry there, you might carry kelim from the house to the chotzer. So it's also Rav Yochanan l'tamei. So we see that he follows his reason and he's not geyser. Now the Gemara is going to discuss the shita of Shmuel. Yosef Rabruna v'Kamar l'al ha'shmaitzim. Rabruna was sitting, and he said over the memra of Shmuel. The memra of Shmuel that says that it's enough to have that a movi is nitzer b'lechi v'kaira, that if you have on one house, there is one side of the movi rather, there's a house without a chotzer, and on the other side you have a chotzer with one house. That's sufficient. Then it's considered a movi that's nitzer b'lechi v'kaira. So, Omrele Rabbi Elazar bar Beirav. So Rabbi Elazar said to him, he said, bar Beirav, a yeshiva student, he said, Omer Shmuel Hachi, did Shmuel really say this? Did he say that a movi is nitzer b'lechi v'kaira if on one side is a house and the other side is a chotzer with only one house? Omer le'yin, he said yes. Omer le'ach v'le'i ushbize, he said, show me where he's staying. Achvile, he showed it to him. Also, the Kami the Shmuel, Rabbi Elazar came before Shmuel and he said, Omar le, Omar mar hachi, did you really say that this is sufficient? Omar le'in? So he said, yes. I, Rabbi Elazar asked, V'hamar hu de Omar, it was you who said, Ein lanu be'eruvin, and with L'shem mishasenu. In Eruvin, we have to be medayik, exact with the precise lashon of the Mishnah. And the lashon of the Mishnah is sha'amovi l'chatzeres, that a movi is to chaseres. A movi is the relationship to a movi to chaseres. It's kechatzer, like a case of kechatzer lebatim, like chaseres to houses. So therefore it says movi l'chatzeres. It says that in the lashon rabim in plural, movi l'chatzer kechatzer lebatim. So it says the diuk, the lashon meduik, is chatzei reis. So how can you say that it's enough to have only one chatzer? That one on one side is a house and the other side is a chatzer. It says chatzei reis. So that's the taina that Rabbi Elazar had to Shmuel. The more is next discussion. We'll see throughout the next Amud if Shmuel accepted that taina or not.